Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at the GMP5. This was sent to me by a viewer, so a huge thank you to William for sending this along. If he's okay with it, I'll put his Instagram down in the description box. If he's not, then you won't see it there. I will also put down in the description box a link to Giant Mouse Knives, so you can kind of go over there and get a feel for the overall aesthetic. Certainly, I will say that this knife fits right in. Giant Mouse Knives is a collaboration between Jens Anzo and Jasper Voxnes, and there's no missing that if you start looking at their models just a little bit. This one is definitely one of the ones that I like an awful lot. In other cases, all right, I have found the knives a little small for my liking, and even this one has a blade that is not quite to the length that I like to see, especially for actually the overall size of this knife. But, all right, let me flip it over so you guys can get a look at the other side. But I have to say, I do like this design. It feels really good in hand, and it absolutely feels like enough knife. So don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about this right off the bat, okay? Now, I do want to speak just for a second to the person who would say, well, Kevin, this is a limited run knife. Why are you even bothering? Because we really can't go out and get one. Well, I'm aware of that, except for a couple of things. Number one, there are some still available on the Giant Mouse website. Number two, these often come available on the secondary market. So if you really wanted one and you were willing to shop around a bit, it wouldn't be all that difficult to get your hands on one. Number three, and perhaps the biggest of the reasons, is I just like knives, and most of you guys who watch my videos like knives. And so people come here to see knives that they're interested in. I don't know about you guys, maybe no one else does this, but I constantly watch knife videos about knives that I'm never gonna buy, that I have no interest in buying, but I'm just curious about the knife. And so there's some entertainment value and some curiosity satisfaction that is also coming from this video. So that's why I still make videos, even about knives that may not be available or not easily available. All right. Let's go ahead and start off with size and weight on this guy. This knife is just a hair under 8 inches overall, 7 15/16. The blade length is 3 and just about 3/8. It's a little more than 5/16. It's not quite 3/8. So it's kind of in that weird zone right there. That is a little short for the size of this knife, I feel, especially when you consider that, you know, there's quite a big choil here. So you're actually losing, you know, another 1/4 inch of cutting edge or so. So you end up with only about 3 inches of cutting edge. 4 9/16 on the handle. So just a little over 4.5 inches. It's fairly thin, around 3/8 of an inch thick, so it fits in your pocket pretty comfortably with that milled titanium clip, which I do think is very attractive with the overall design. And it weighs in, now this is the one number, the two numbers that I'm not crazy about are the weight, which is 5.1 ounces, and the blade length, really the cutting edge, which is only 3 inches. So you're not usually gonna see a 3-inch cutting edge on an 8-inch knife. That's a little disproportionate. And that's really my biggest complaint about this knife. Otherwise, I'm very impressed with it. I will make one other comment as we work our way through here, but if I was gonna buy a Giant Mouse knife, it would either be this one or perhaps the GMP1, which was a pretty impressive knife as well. Let's go ahead and talk about the blade first off, the way that we normally do. So we have a really attractive blade here, top swedge on the clip point, nicely crowned spine. Let me get that to focus for you. Little spot of jimping where your thumb can go. I've got to say, I really, really like that touch. You can see this very nice grind here. It's pretty thin behind the edge, around 22 thousandths, but 158 thousandths overall in terms of stock. And so this blade is, and you know, I say this a lot, at least about knives that I like, this blade is a pretty nice balance of a good thin edge so it cuts well, and a nice thick stock so it's fairly, you know, robust and tough. And the way they've done this with the swedge and the flat grind is going to give a little bit of strength out here at the tip. Let's see, come on, focus. For some reason it doesn't want to focus. There we go. And I would still say to you, you shouldn't be jamming the tip of your knife into anything and putting lateral force on it. As you can see, just take a look at it. It's not meant to be strong in that direction. So, you know, just kind of bear that in mind. I always carry a pry tool with me anyway. And certainly a knife like this, because of its cost, because of the limited nature of being able to get your hands on one, I think most people who buy these are going to be taking it a little bit easy with them anyway. All right. So that's my overall take on the blade. I like the look of the black wash with the bronze, I really do. But generally speaking, I tend toward either plain stonewash or better yet, satin finished blades because of the fact that they don't show wear very much, or at least they don't show much wear. Again, that may be mitigated by the fact that this knife is sort of a collector piece, so maybe isn't going to get that much use. But I do feel like this is a collector piece. It's not that can be used. It's not overly expensive, and it's certainly built to be used, okay? Let's talk a little bit about lockup and deployment. Pretty standard titanium frame lock stuff here. We've got the lock bar insert, we've got a bearing pivot system, we've got, I'll show you the stop pin back there, you can see, and nice relief cut. I will say I really like the fact that they've gone with a thicker relief cut. That always gives me a little more confidence and certainly makes this knife sort of lean toward the harder use side of the spectrum, although the bearings kind of take away from that, as does the fact that this knife is going to be a little tough to get your hands on. So if you do destroy it, right, it's not like you can just go to the store and buy another one. They're rather limited, so you may have to be a little more careful. The one complaint that I do have, let me just demonstrate opening this a couple of times. So the thumb hole works really well for rolling the knife out. It works well for flicking the knife out. And you can spider flick this guy as well. So opening is pretty nice. The only complaint I have about lockup and deployment is just the way that they've done the lock bar access. You really kind of have to give it some thought and get your thumb in there in order to open this knife. Even the slightest bit of offset would have been appreciated so that I could sort of catch that just a little bit easier. Now, it's not impossible, it's not uncomfortable, but I always feel like, you know, a knife at this price point, every detail should really be perfectly thought out and perfectly executed. And so that's, you know, as I say, it's not a real problem. I've opened and closed this dozens of times, perhaps hundreds of times with no issue, but it's not as intuitive as I feel like it could be. So they lose a couple of points for that, but overall, everything is easy to work. It does what you want it to do when you want it to do it. The detent is nicely dialed in. The bearing pivot is smooth. So, you know, everything is as we would like to see it in a high-end titanium folder. All right. Moving on to the handle, since we're talking about a high-end titanium frame lock, you can see obviously titanium scales here, titanium backspacer with that nice bronze anode that matches the single position clip, and the pivot collar. By the way, while we're looking, you can see the owner has messed with this clip a little bit, and I guess there's a lot of Loctite in here. So before I send this back, I will put a little heat on this and loosen that up for him. I'm not sure why you want to take the pocket clip off, but at least then he'll be able to do that if and when he wants to. The texturing here and the 3D machining is really nice, and it does make this knife feel really good in hand and inspire a lot of confidence in use. So I've got to say, from an ergonomic standpoint, this definitely gets a lot of points, especially I love, and you guys, you know, I don't know how many videos I've talked about this in. I know it's been a lot. I always talk about the fact that I like to rest my thumb up here on the blade, and not all knives kind of think about that. Well, this knife, not only did it think about that, but it specifically gave me jimping to allow me to choke up and get some detailed cutting here. And I've got to say, I really like that. The only, you know, ergonomic complaint I have is I feel like, and this is, you know, more of a construction discussion as well, there's a lot of wasted space right in here. You could, and actually, you know, there's my finger. This is almost large enough for a choil. So just tweaking this a little bit to allow me to get a finger here, and you actually can put a finger right on the front here. It's not meant for it, and it's not super comfortable, but you could do it. It would have been nice to see, you know, at least flatten this out so I can put my finger here and do some fine detailed work. Otherwise, though, ergonomics and overall construction is very good. The one thing, we talked about weight already, there is no milling on this. And milling is one of the things we're kind of used to seeing at the price point that these go for, which I think is around 350 bucks. So it would have been nice to see a little bit of internal milling here just to lighten this up overall. And then, you know, I would have been having a bit of a different discussion on the size and weight category as well. So overall, do I like the way this is constructed? Yes, I do. Do I like the way it feels in hand? Yes, I do. Couple little tweaks, but nothing that I can really say is a fail or a real problem in terms of how the knife functions, all right? So let's go ahead and get to some comparisons. I've got a couple of knives here that, you know, kind of put me in mind of this one. I do try to bring in the Inkosi whenever we're taking a look at a titanium frame lock. You know, the big thing here is, and the big reason I'm bringing this in, is you've got a knife similar in size and weight, but you get quite a bit more cutting edge. It's just a little more efficient in terms of, you know, how much cutting edge you're getting for the 5 ounces that you're carrying. All right. Also, everyone is familiar with the Inkosi, so I think that gives a good idea of size. You can see it's just a teeny bit smaller here. Let's bring in a knife that is a little bit smaller, that has a very similar amount of cutting edge. This, of course, is the Mastrop Ferrum Forge Crux, one of my favorite titanium frame lock folders here. This is a really, really good example, and one of the few knives that makes me bend my rule for knives I own must be 8 inches. This is just so well done. And I think, again, this is worth the comparison because of the fact that it's in a similar vein. It's sort of a little heavier built. It's got a flat grind. It's a knife that's absolutely designed to be used. And I guess the other point here is, you know, when we're talking about high-end titanium frame locks, this one really challenges the whole perception of value. So if you say, Kevin, I love this knife, but I just, man, you know, where would I get one? Well, you can get one of these pretty easily and maybe satisfy your longing for a high-end titanium frame lock that's really well built and designed to use. One last folder I'll bring in here, not because it's super similar, but they kind of remind me of one another for some reason. This, of course, is the Kaiser Uprising, which is one of my favorite Kaiser models. I think this is a knife you're going to either love or hate. It's got a distinctive look to it. For me, it fits great in hand, and I love the cutting performance on it. So I'm really drawn to this knife. But the reason it compares to me is we've got the similar stock thickness and a nice flat grind. So here's a knife again that cuts really well, despite the fact that it's, you know, leaning toward the heavier end of the spectrum. All right, so those are just a few options. I don't want to go too crazy with comparisons because, you know, this video I want to kind of feature this knife. It's a special sort of collector's limited run knife, and so I want to put our focus on this a bit. So what are my overall thoughts about it? Well, I think the design is extremely attractive. I think the blade is really, really well balanced. It's comfortable in hand. It's cool. It's limited. So if you're one of those guys who likes the stuff that not everyone is going to be able to get a hold of, this is a great example of something you would want to go after. It's only like 350 bucks, so it's not like a true custom where, you know, yeah, that'll scratch the itch for $2,000 or, you know, whatever, high hundreds for sure. This is a knife that gives you that feeling of, hey, I've got something really special here. I've got something that I love and that's unique and not everyone is going to be able to get a hold of, but it's not so special and so unique that you could never use it or that you have to be afraid of it in some way because it's only, you know, like 350 bucks. The other, I guess, point here, and this is going to be up to individual users. Remember, I didn't buy this knife. It was sent for review. You'll have to ask yourself the question, am I willing to pay the kind of money they want for this when there are other sort of regular production knives available for less that do about the same thing? Now, the problem with that is you could say that about just about any knife that costs more than, I don't know, $60 or $70. So there you go. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your comments below, what your thoughts on this knife, whether you've got one and what you think of it. And let me just say, I'm sorry for the lack of videos the last little bit. Things have been a little crazy and I've had some technology hiccups as well. So you can expect a slightly more normal schedule of releases on videos. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.